If you want strong, pain-free shoulders, then you do not want to make this mistake. We are going to be talking about training the rotator cuff, the scapular stabilizers, structural balance training to overcome the vast majority of shoulder injuries, including slap tears, torn rotator cuffs, shoulder dislocations, many other common sporting injuries to the shoulder, and talking about the muscle groups that you need to train and the big mistake that people make when they are doing shoulder training that I see most commonly in our online coaching. So if that's you, if you've got a shoulder injury, if you want to overcome it, then stick around because you're going to get a lot out of this. And if you're watching on YouTube, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It really goes a long way. I put a lot of effort into putting out all this free content for you guys. And one thing that you can do to show me some appreciation is just to subscribe. Really helps the algorithm to get our content out there. And if you don't know who I am, my name's Rad. I'm one of the co-owners and co-founders of Unity Gym, along with my brother Yanni. And I have had a slap tear in both shoulders, torn rotator cuffs, and multiple other injuries that I've overcome without surgery, and I'm now stronger than I was before I had my slap tears. So all of the strength, all of my best efforts with strength training in my upper body have come after slap tears. So what I am about to talk about with shoulder conditioning, it really works, and I've now used the same methods to help hundreds of people around the world, all verified by our Google reviews and our testimonials on YouTube. So stick around. Now, the big mistake that people make with shoulder training is incorrect technique. The shoulder is a very complex joint, and the mistake that so many people make is that they think they need to find the magic exercise that's going to fix their shoulder pain or the magic program. But if you perform the exercise or the program or the exercises in your program incorrectly, you will not achieve the results that you're after. Technique optimization is vital for strong shoulders, for overcoming injury, and for getting you back to a pain-free life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about the muscle systems that need to be trained to make your shoulders strong and robust, and then I'll talk about the common technique mistakes that people make. So when you look at the shoulder joint, we really want to think of two muscle systems. We have the inner unit of the deeper stabilization muscle systems and the outer unit of prime movers. Now, the outer unit of prime movers, most people are training because they're the muscles, they're the pecs, the deltoids, the lats, the biceps and the triceps. Yes, the biceps and the triceps are considered muscle systems that control shoulder movement as well. There's a head of the biceps and a head of the tricep that crosses the shoulder joint and assists in shoulder movement. So that's what we call the outer unit of prime movers. Those are the muscles that it's called the outer unit because they're superficial. Superficial means they're on the surface of the body, so they're the ones that you can see in the mirror. They're the ones that, for the people that want to look better, that are training for aesthetics, that's what they're training. You know, they're trying to get bigger pecs, bigger shoulders, bigger lats, bigger biceps and triceps, and they're the muscles that create movement. So they're the big muscles that move the arm around, move the shoulder around. But then there's an inner unit of stabilization muscles. And there's many muscles, but the main ones that I'm going to talk about is the rotator cuff. So the rotator cuff consists of it's 4 muscles in the rotator cuff, and there's potentially even 5, and I'll talk to you about what the potential 5th one is as well. So the 4 muscles that are traditionally considered the rotator cuff is the subscapularis, which is, it connects to the scapula at the back, but it's on the front side of the scapula, and that's the one that wraps around and hooks onto the front of the humerus. And so it creates internal rotation. Then there's the supraspinatus, which comes from the top of the scapula and down under the acromion process and hooks onto the top of the humerus. Then there's the infraspinatus, which is just a little bit further back. And then there's the teres minor, which is a really small muscle at the back as well. The infraspinatus and the supraspinatus are external rotators, so they externally rotate. They make the arm shoulder move like that. The supraspinatus actually also assists in external rotation, and it assists in it creates abduction like this, pulling out here, assists with the deltoids. And I actually learned this from my physical therapist friend or physiotherapist friend in Australia, who is a an elite physiotherapist. He's a physiotherapist for sporting clubs in Australia. So he's at the absolute top of his game. And he was actually telling me that there's recent research being done that's showing that the long head of the bicep is actually part of the rotator cuff as well, that it assists in shoulder stabilization. Now, I've just described what those four muscles, or what that muscle system, the movements that it helps assist, but its primary function, its primary role is to create what's called a force coupling. So a force coupling is when there's two opposing forces pulling on the same object to hold it in place. So when we look at the humerus, which is the bone in the upper arm, and how it sits in the glenohumeral joint, so it's a ball and socket joint, so that's the glenohumeral joint at the end of the shoulder here. Imagine that's sitting like this, and the humerus is sitting in the top of it. The rotator cuff, so the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor are all kind of on the top and the back of the rotator cuff, and the subscapularis is on the front. And they all pull against each other so that the head of the humerus doesn't pull in any one direction. You know, they're all pulling in opposing forces to hold that humerus in place. Because one of the most painful things that you'll ever get in your shoulder is something called joint glide, which is when the rotator cuff isn't doing its job properly and the shoulder moves like, the humerus moves like this. It's designed to rotate and to pivot like that. That's what it's meant to do. And if you get joint glide, which is what happens when you get shoulder impingement and when you've had a traumatic shoulder injury and the rotator cuff stops doing its job properly, because that's what happens after a traumatic shoulder injury, is that the nervous system loses its ability to control the rotator cuff properly. That's when you start getting a lot of aches and pains. Then the other part of the inner unit of the shoulder is the scapular stabilizers, because all of the muscles that I just described there they control movement in the humerus, in the shoulder joint, and they hold the humerus in place. But then the other muscle systems that we need to talk about are the muscles that control scapula. And the main, I mean, you have the, oh my God, it's too early in the morning. Why can't I think of this? The, what's it called? I'm having a brain fart here. Anyway, the muscle that controls scapular protraction. I can't believe I can't think of it right now. It's too early in the morning for me over here in Australia. And the pec minor. So those are muscles that control scapular movement as well. But the ones that I'm mostly talking about are the rhomboids and the mid and lower trapezius, which control scapular retraction, and also the lats that assist with scapular, well, the lats are the primary scapular depressors. But the muscles that control scapular retraction and depression, because those muscles and that function of the shoulder is very, very important. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So why am I talking technique optimization? Because what happens is these muscles are so small, and very often they are very weak, which is why people experience shoulder pain. And one of the first things that we look at in the Unified Movement System, UMS, that we teach, is regaining function in these muscle systems and regaining balance. This is what structural balance training is all about. And so you're doing exercises like external rotation, like a lying external rotation from the hip like this, which is the easier version of external rotation. You move into external rotations from the knee as you get better, and eventually unsupported external rotations like this. But the thing is that because the rotator cuff and the external rotators of the rotator cuff are so small, and often your ability to control them, the neuromuscular connection between, so that's the connection between the brain and the muscles, is just not doing its job properly, that what happens is you kind of bypass the rotator cuff and you create external rotation with the posterior deltoid, because the posterior deltoid, so the deltoid has anterior, medial, and posterior heads to it, 3 heads. The posterior deltoid is a very strong external rotator, and it does a lot of the external rotation work. And if you're not doing the correct technique with your external rotations, then that posterior deltoid is just going to take over and do the job of external rotation, and you're not training your rotator cuff. And the same thing can even happen by trying to do external rotation, is that you add in some retraction in the scapula. So you're bringing the rhomboids and the trapezius into the movement to just create some kind of a movement. And so you might be doing external rotation and you're looking at the exercise on YouTube and you're, Aaron's saying, take your time. I can't believe that I've forgotten the name of this muscle, so I'm just going to Google it because I just can't believe that it's skipping me. Protractor, scapular protractor muscles, serratus anterior. I have a complete brain fart that I couldn't remember that. The serratus anterior was the muscle I was thinking of, which is a scapular protractor that connects to the upper ribs down the front here and connects onto the front of the scapula, and it protracts the scapula. So so what happens is, you've got your program, or you've looked online, you've looked on YouTube, you've said what muscles are going to strengthen my rotator cuff, and you've seen some videos that show external rotation, and you're doing the exercise, but you're doing it with incorrect technique. And what's going to happen is you're just going to reinforce the strength of the outer unit muscles, the muscles that are already strong, and you're not going to strengthen the inner unit, the rotator cuff muscles that you're trying to strengthen. And I work with, the majority of people that we work with online are people that have been training for a long time already. We've identified that the vast majority of our online coaching tribe are people that have been training for years, maybe even decades, but persistent pain and injury is now preventing them from being able to train the way that they want as they are getting older, and they're tired of their best efforts just not yielding the results that they want, and they're done with it, and they just want to have a breakthrough. We do train with beginners, we're open to anybody, but we just attract those people more often. And so what I'm saying here is, in a way, more important and more relevant for those of you that have been training for a while. Because what happens is, when you've been training for years or decades the incorrect way, when you've been training with incorrect technique, you need technique optimization more than a beginner. Because you need a coach to be looking at you to be able to say, you need to keep your scapula depressed and avoid retraction and drop the weight and keep all these tiny little cues that you won't have picked up yourself. If you had have picked it up yourself, you wouldn't still be sitting here wondering why the training isn't paying off for you. And that technique optimization is just so vital. I did a video yesterday on correct technique for bent over row. Now, there's many ways that you can do a bent over row. And there's not, like, to say correct technique is not necessarily right, because there are different ways that you can do it for different goals. But at the grassroots of what I train people for, and what I've learned is the most important for me, at the grassroots of it is to create structural balance, to create a shoulder movement pattern with, in a pulling and a pushing pattern that is optimal, that uses all of the muscles and all the joints the way that you want to be using them to produce maximal strength and to reduce aches and pains and overcome injuries. And if that's what you want, so somebody might say, oh, but if you do your row this way, it's going to build more muscle in the lats, or that I can't lift as much weight as if I do that, and I want to build as much muscle as possible, and so lifting more weight is more relevant. Well, sure. If you're just focused on bodybuilding, and if you just want the aesthetics, and you're looking at, the ways that you could lift more weight to failure, then maybe doing it, however you can do it is the right way for you to do. But if you want to be able to do good pull-ups, if you ever want to be able to get your chest to the bar, if you want to overcome the aches and pains in your shoulder, then what I'm about to say, and what I shared in this reel that I posted yesterday, this 45-second reel on the correct way to do a bent over row, then this is vital for you. Because what sparked me doing this live stream today, and was from the video that I did yesterday. And the video that I did yesterday, what sparked me to do it is the amount of times in my online coaching that I'm coaching people on exactly what I'm going to say to you now. So people that have been training for years, sometimes decades, need to hear what I'm about to say. So when you do a row, a row is when is considered a horizontal pull like this. So there's many ways you can do it. You can do a bent over row, you can do it with a barbell, you can do it with dumbbells, you can do a single dumbbell, you can do it with rings, where you're leaning back and the rings are hanging up there and you're rowing. But it's basically when you're pulling your hands towards your body like this. So you're pulling the force towards you. I mean, you can do seated rows at the gym, where you use the cable machines. That's considered a rowing pattern as well. And most people think of the row as being an exercise to target the lats, maybe also to target the posterior deltoids and the biceps. But the row is a very, very good exercise to also target the rhomboids, which is this muscle that connects, that hooks onto the inside of the scapula and does scapular retraction, and also to the mid trapezius and even the lower trapezius a little bit as well. And the incorrect technique that I'm seeing almost everybody do is that they're not engaging the retraction of the scapula first, rowing, maintaining the retraction of the scapula while they do the eccentric phase, and then protracting. What you see so often with people when they row, when you watch in the gym, especially the guys that are the more experienced people in the gym, when you look at the people that are, buff and you can see them that they've been training for years, watch them when they row. They row, and then at the end of the row, as they get the bar close to their chest, they do this little pop, and then pop like that. Have you ever seen anybody do that? Let me know in the comments. And what's going on there is that they don't have the strength to actually use the muscles that they're trying to train properly to get the bar to the chest. And the only way they can get the bar to the chest is when they get to the end of where their strength can take them to, is to do what's called a kip, where they create momentum and get the bar up there to the chest like that. And so what's going on is that they're basically ego lifting. They're lifting an amount of weight that their system can't train, but they're thinking to themselves, I just want to be hitting the lats, or I just want to, whatever the muscle system that they're trying to hit is. And they're not thinking of the way that the whole body works synergistically to create a movement. And so if you continue to do your rows like that, where you're never actually able to control scapular retraction, so you engage, every rep starts by retracting the scapula, maintaining that retraction as you row, maintaining the retraction as you go through the eccentric phase, then protracting and then initiating again. If you can't do that, then you're missing out on this massive amount of muscle growth in that inner unit of scapular stabilizers. And there's a lot of issues with that. But even if you're not, if you're talking about wanting to overcome shoulder pain, honestly, so much just niggling shoulder pain will be overcome just from doing that. Just from learning how to engage the scapula properly into retraction when you row, how to engage the scapula into depression when you do a pull-up or a lat pull-down, and how to properly access the external rotators of the rotator cuff during external rotation. And I'll explain why. So when you look at a movement, you have what's called a kinetic chain. So the kinetic chain are all the joints that are involved in the movement. So when we look at a row, we've got our wrist joint, we've got our elbow joint, and then we've got our shoulder joint. But the shoulder joint is a little bit of a tricky one because it's not just the shoulder joint going through extension and flexion in the shoulder. It's also the scapula going through retraction and protraction. So all of those joints are part of the kinetic chain to produce that force to be able to create that movement. Now, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so the ego lifter doesn't look at the weakest link. The ego lifter looks at the amount of weight that they can move from here to here. How much weight can I get from here to here? And however they get it done, the ego is just going to make it happen. But the smart lifter looks at how much weight can I move from here to here with correct technique. And it will never be as much as you could just grab and reef up when you're just thinking about getting that weight up any way that you can. So it's really, really important that when you do your rows, that you focus on optimal technique and you review yourself and you make sure that you're doing it the right way. Because the rhomboids and the mid and lower trapezius, they actually respond best to time under tension. So I get asked this on YouTube. I very rarely get asked it in our online coaching, but on YouTube and on social media, I get asked this quite a bit. People say, why do you retract the scapula, hold it there, and then hold it retracted, and then protract at the end? Why do you do that? Why don't you just row and do it like everybody else does? And the reason is because the rhomboids, the mid and lower trapezius, respond best to time under tension. So what that means is those muscle systems actually respond quite well to isometric contractions. So we train those same muscle systems in the UMS with other movements, like, for example, the trap 3 raise, where you go through that retraction and depression, raise a dumbbell up, often pause for up to 6 seconds. So you're keeping time under tension there, and then a slow eccentric phase and back down. So by the time you've finished one rep, there's actually been a 10-second isometric contraction between those muscles that create that retraction in the scapula. Same thing with doing an arching scapular pull-in, where you're hanging onto a bar and you depress, retract, and extend the shoulders a bit, and then at the top of the rep, you hold it for 3 seconds, and then back down. And the reason why we do that is because, again, those muscle systems that create retraction in the scapula respond very, very well to time under tension. So if all you're doing is just kind of reefing it and then letting it go forward, you're missing out on these massive amount of gains in that inner unit of vital scapular stabilizers that you really need to be strong in order to be pain-free. Now, when you're training in your 20s, you likely won't feel any pain or discomfort. Like, we've all gone through that. Even in your early 30s, a lot of people can get through. But by the time you get to your mid to late 30s, all of your poor choices, you can't hide from your poor choices anymore. You can easily hide from your poor choices when you're in your 20s, maybe even in your 30s. But when you get to your late 30s and 40s, you cannot hide from your poor choices anymore. They are coming, they're on the surface for everybody to see. The aches and pains that you feel from not training the right way are going to severely restrict the way that you can enjoy your life now and the way that you can do things. And so it's really important that you get the technique right for this, yeah? And then if we go further, if you want to look at being able to do like the perfect pull-up, which is where you're going to hang and you're going to depress and retract the scapula. And I can actually pull this up for those of you on YouTube. You won't be able to see it on TikTok or Instagram, of course, because you can't see my computer. But I filmed myself doing this just the other day to be able to include it in the reel that I shared yesterday. So I can show you guys this. I'm just going to pull it up. Here we go. So let me share this. All right, so you can see me here doing what, the technique is, they call it the perfect pull-up, where you don't use your legs at all for it. And you can see at the top of the rep there where I've paused, my chest is touching the bar and I have full scapular retraction. So if you watch again from the start, if VLC player lets me restart the video without glitching out, maybe I have to stop it and start it again. So if you watch when I start the rep, you'll see that I depress the scapula, then retract it as I extend the shoulders. It all happens very, very quickly. So see that? And then at the top, you can see full scapular retraction as my chest touches the bar. So if you ever want to be able to do that, if you're stuck on pull-ups and you just can't get the you just can't get your chest to the bar, or you can't make improvements, without a doubt, one of the things that's going to send you leaps and bounds forward is creating very strong scapular retraction. And fixing these movement patterns, the thing is that the further you are down your journey with training, the more work you need, the more technique optimization you need, not less. And this is where, when you're in your 30s and definitely your 40s, you've really got two roads that you can go down. You can acknowledge the aches and pains you've got. You can listen to somebody like me and you can say, nah, I know better. I'm just going to keep doing it my way. And I guarantee you that by the time you get to my age, I turned 47 in 2 months, I guarantee you that those aches and pains are going to be so much worse, and your ability to do the things that you want to do will be so badly stifled that you'll be desperate for a solution. Or you can go the other way, which is despite your best efforts, despite how hard you've trained, and despite that you have achieved more than the average person, you can just take a little bit of a bite of humble pie and say, well, I guess I didn't know how to do it as well as I thought I would, and I'm now going to go and get help from somebody that can show me how to do it properly. Because everybody that I work with online that's been training for that long, they come in with similar stories. They all come in with, I've tried physiotherapy, I've seen doctors, I've even seen surgeons for my shoulder pain, and nothing's worked. All the physio I did, it just didn't have a lasting effect. And within a week, every single one of them says my shoulder feels better after 1 week of training, and within 3 months, they are completely pain-free. One of our members, Karina, who just recently, so she's been training with me for over a year, and she came to me for a slap tear. And I mean, look, I've got videos of people who have rehabilitated their slap tears and things like that are definitely going to be more impactful than this, but this is just something that's happened in the last 48 hours. You know, Karina has watched this video. I did it, guys. If you've got injuries and you want to know about how much faith you should put in your MRI and your X-ray, you should go and watch this video that I'm looking at here on my YouTube channel, where one of our members, Paul, who's been an orthopedic spine surgeon for over 20 years and who's been training with me for over a year now. I was talking to him about MRIs and X-rays and the best way to deal with back pain and stuff like that. And that is a really, really good video to watch if you've had any injuries. But anyway, here's the comment that I wanted to read from Karina. Karina said, "Thank you, Paul. This gives me so much hope. From my experience, even with exercise, pain can continue. I went to the physio, chiro, and did group training at the gym, and my shoulder pains sustained and worsened to become debilitating. It wasn't until doing the UMS with Unity Gym where my pain and restriction diminished and then went completely. The pain had been worsening for several years. It began improving with the first session at UMS and disappeared within weeks. The restriction disappeared within several months. It's correct training with the correct program and system and proper coaching feedback." And that's my point of this. And as I come to the end of this live stream, for anybody that's watching this, I know this is a shameless plug, but the truth is, if you want results like that, I promise you, you will not get the life-changing results that you're after from putting together a program, from watching YouTube videos or social media. What creates the results that Karina has had and that all of our members had is the coaching and the feedback loop from me and my brother of being able to review their technique. Because the program is, the correct exercises and the program that you have is a vital part of achieving the results that you want. If you have the wrong program, it doesn't matter how well you perform it, you're not going to get the results that you want. It's like the old analogy, rowing harder in the wrong direction doesn't get you closer to where you want to go. So that's vital. Of course, you have to have the right program, but of course, that's what we provide. But the second part is technique optimization. You can have the best program in the world, but if you're executing the exercises incorrectly, you will not get the results that you want. And so if anyone's watched this and you think, you know what, I'm really tired of spending all this time on YouTube and on social media and trying to work this stuff out and not getting the results I want, if that's you, then go to unitygym.com and come and work with me. And I guarantee you that within a week, you'll feel better. And within a few months, your aches and pains will be gone. Unless you have a really traumatic shoulder injury that requires more attention, which I still believe, and I've got so many reviews to back this up, we will be able to get you pain-free. It might just take a little bit longer. But, ask yourself what's important to you. How much more time have you got to waste? How much time do you have to waste on ineffective methods? Because I can tell you right now, I've got no time to waste on ineffective methods. Everything that I do is about getting the best result as quick as possible. So anyway, I hope you guys got something valuable out of that. Even if all you do is take away from what I talked about with my with what you should be doing with the rows and with your external rotations and the importance of those movements and getting them right, even if that's all you take away from this, it could still have a huge impact on your training. And for those of you that want to go a step further, go to unitygym.com and come and work with me. Bjorn is saying, how important is it to perform techniques perfect to get the benefits from them? If I'm doing an exercise with 90% correct technique, is that useless? Definitely not. No, not at all. It takes a long time to get an exercise perfect. So you would, even when you're doing an exercise with 80% correct technique, you're still going to be getting benefits. And as you know, Bjorn, you're working with me online, this feedback loop that you're getting where you film yourself doing an exercise, you post it, and within a day or two, I'm doing a screen recording, fixing up your technique a little bit. You apply those, technique optimizations, and maybe the correctness of your movement goes from 55% correct to 60% correct. You're still getting benefit from that. But the idea is that by filming yourself regularly and getting feedback from a coach like me, is that little bit of 5% improvement just keeps adding up. And before you know it, you're doing an exercise 90%, 95% correct, and that's when the real game-changing results happen. It really does. Aaron San is saying, if you have any kind of shoulder impingement, isn't it just better to not do any weightlifting at all? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is, I want you to really perk your ears up here, Aaron. That is the worst thing that you can do. The rest is not best. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you there is so many problems with that approach. And unfortunately, it comes from really bad advice from doctors. A doctor doesn't know a fraction of what I know about injury rehabilitation. They are not trained in it. And unfortunately, people go to doctors and doctors say, go and get a scan. And then they get a diagnosis from the scan and they say, you should avoid that exercise because it's making it worse. It's the worst advice you can get. And I'll tell you why. When you rest, this is the only thing that happens. The inflammation gets a chance to subside. So if you have an injury, if you've got a torn rotator cuff, if you've got a slap tear, if you've got shoulder impingement, then the more you move your shoulder incorrectly where you're getting that joint glide like I described before, the more pain it's going to cause, and the more pain it causes, the more inflammation goes in the joint. It's this cascading effect. So they tell you to rest, you rest for 2 or 3 weeks, the inflammation goes down, and you think, oh wow, my shoulder's gotten better. But the issue that you have is still there. There's whatever the underlying issue was that caused that pain, it hasn't miraculously gone away. The only thing that's happened is that the inflammation's gone down. And then you go, oh wow, my shoulder feels better, and you go back to try and do whatever it was that caused the pain initially. Maybe it's play sport. Maybe you want to go back and play some pickleball. Maybe you want to play some basketball. Maybe you want to go and do some rock climbing or martial arts, or maybe you just want to go to the gym and lift some weights. And the second that you do the thing that caused the pain originally, boom, the pain comes back with a vengeance, and you're just stuck in this loop and you're banging your head against the wall because you're like, the doctor told me to do this and my x-ray and MRI says I've got all of this going on, and you start just feeding this horrible mentality that you're this injured person that isn't going to get better. And it is fucking bullshit advice that I'm very passionate about here, because if a doctor was doing their job properly, what they would say is, I'm not an exercise specialist. I'm not an injury rehab specialist. I'm a GP, and you should go and see a physical therapist and get a proper diagnosis, and then see an injury rehab expert who can guide you to pain-free again. That's what a doctor should say. So why is exercise a better option than that? Because when you don't exercise for 2, 3, 4 weeks, guess what's happening whilst the inflammation is going down? Your muscles are atrophying and you're becoming weaker. You're losing the neuromuscular connection between the scapular stabilizers and the rotator cuff, the vital muscle systems that I described before. That neuromuscular connection is weakening more, it's going down, and you're becoming weaker. So exercise is vital when you have a shoulder injury. What you need to do is to understand load management. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go a step further. You don't need to understand load management because it's such a big thing to wrap your head around. You need to work with somebody that understands load management, that can guide you through this so that you don't have to bang your head wondering why the stuff that you're doing isn't working. But when you exercise, when you have shoulder impingement, or when you have a torn rotator cuff, or when you have a slap tear, the purpose of the exercise is in the first stages, it's to regain or rebuild neuromuscular connection between the rotator cuff and the scapular stabilizers first, and also to maintain strength in the prime movers so that you don't atrophy your muscles. So the amount of load that you'll be lifting, what I mean by understanding load management is, maybe normally you can bench press 100 pounds, but now that you've got this shoulder impingement, if you try to bench press 80 pounds, it hurts. The solution is not to not bench press. The solution is to do unilateral chest pressing so that the arms are individually moving the dumbbells one at a time, rather than doing a barbell where the non-injured side is going to do the majority of the work. So that's the first step. And then reducing the load to an amount that you can lift that doesn't make your pain worse. So whilst you might normally be able to do 40 pounds in each hand when you do dumbbell chest pressing, you might only be doing 10 or 15 pounds in the earlier phases of shoulder rehab. But that is strengthening the neuromuscular connection, maintaining muscle mass, and building strength, and also stimulating blood flow, which is very, very important for rehabilitation. And then the same goes for all of the other muscles. You know, like this idea that you rest to fix an injury it's such bad advice. It is coming from exceptional physical therapists. When I've asked them, what are the injuries that you would rest for? The only answer that they gave me was, a fractured bone, you need to immobilize because the bone needs to reset. So if a bone fractures, let's say your radius or ulnar, one of the bones in your forearm, it fractures, it's connected normally and it breaks. When they reset it and put it back into place, you have to immobilize that because any movement will cause the bone to regrow where it is. So that is one injury where you do have to immobilize a joint, which is why traditionally, when you have a broken bone, they put you in a cast. And the idea of the cast is that it immobilizes the area so it can't move, okay? And also something where you've got a wound. So if you've had a hernia repaired and they've cut you open and you have a wound and you have stitches that are repairing, then you need to avoid anything that's going to pull those stitches apart until that repairs. But anything else, any other sports-related injury, movement is the best thing that you can do. Exercise is what is required to recover. And a real problem is, and this is coming from Paul, this is Paul, the spine surgeon. He said one of the biggest problems that he sees when he treats his patient is he tries to tell them, you should not get surgery for this. You should do rehabilitation. You should make yourself strong so that you don't need surgery. And what he sees in people is that most people would rather be cut open and have some prosthetics put in so that they don't have to do any work. But there's major problems with that because the outcome is unpredictable and you can't strengthen and adapt prosthetics. Once they're in there, and eventually they'll break down and then you'll need to get them replaced. And so you go through this horrendous cycle of where you need to get more surgeries. Aaron is saying, Verbjorn is saying, is rest from running or soccer best if that sometimes aggravates the injury? Yes. Rest from a sport is different to rest from exercise. And the reason is because when you play a sport is completely unpredictable. So like, you know, for example, you might have a torn meniscus in your knee. And when you have a torn meniscus, the knee shouldn't go past a certain point of knee flexion in the earlier stages, and you shouldn't do any loaded internal rotation. Those are two movements that can cause major pain and can cause the issue to become worse until you've strengthened the knee stabilizers and the hip stabilizers sufficiently, okay? Now, so then when you go to the gym, you'll have a rehabilitation program where, like I tore my meniscus, so I'm speaking, you know, from an expert opinion here. And in the early phases of knee rehab for a torn meniscus, you don't take your knee past about 150 degrees knee flexion. flexion. So if this is your knee here, and your knee bends like that when you do a squat, you don't take your knee past about 150 degrees of knee flexion. So 180 degrees, 90 degrees, 150, whatever it is. It's basically the amount of knee flexion that you would experience when you're walking up and down a flight of stairs, okay? So you're exercising, but you're doing like literally, you're just doing step-ups like this, and you're doing like not even quarter range squats, like, 15% or 20% range squats. And you don't do any loaded internal rotation. Now, if you've got that exact same injury, but you say, I'm going to go and play soccer, you can't control any of that. Because all you're thinking when you play soccer is you're running for the ball or you're running to avoid a player. And your knee is going to be doing all this stuff that it shouldn't be doing, and that makes the issue so much worse. So unfortunately, when you do have a knee injury, then you don't want to avoid the gym. The gym is what you need to do to get back to doing soccer, but you may need a period of time where you do avoid playing soccer. In fact, you almost certainly will. And insert any injury with any sport that aggravates the injury, and it's the same idea. You've got shoulder impingement, it hurts to put your arm up here. Well, if you love rock climbing, you probably shouldn't be rock climbing for a while until you can get your arm above your head without pain. If you've got a shoulder injury and you love playing tennis, same thing. You just can't do it without taking your shoulder through that range of motion that's going to make the injury worse. Because at the grassroots level of an injury, of injury rehab, at the grassroots, this is what you do. Remove the activity that caused the issue to become worse, and apply more activity that caused the issue to improve. Okay? And the activity that causes the issue to improve is always the right strength training using proper load management, progressive overload, and program periodization with some flexibility training. Flexibility training is not nearly as important as strength training when it comes to injury rehabilitation, but there is a time and a place for it. And removing the activity that causes the pain to become worse. So whatever it is that you do that makes your pain worse, you've got to look at that and say, okay, how can I remove this? And when it comes to weightlifting, like Aaron, you've said, I meant no heavy lifting and just light. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the ways that you do that. You're like, I can't do bench pressing with 200 pounds because it makes my shoulder worse. But you know what? I can do chest pressing with dumbbells with 40 pounds in each hand. Great. You just found a way that you can remove the thing that makes your shoulder worse and add the things that are going to make your shoulders better. So I really hope that helps you guys. I hope you got something out of this. For those of you that really want to take control of your shoulder health or any sport-related injury that you have in your body, and if you want to fix that in record time and become, like, honestly, if you want double the results in half the time, then come and join my online coaching, because I guarantee that's what you're going to get. You will get double the result in half the time that you would trying to work, maybe even in a quarter of the time trying to work this out yourself. So go to unitygym.com, get started. You'll go and fill out a pre-exercise questionnaire as soon as you go in the app, and you'll be communicating directly with me. Within 24 hours, I'm going to record a personal video welcoming you, explaining your program, and you'll be working with me directly, to overcome this stuff. Aaron San is saying, like yourself, I'm a big believer in keeping moving. Thanks, mate. You're absolutely welcome. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for commenting. I hope you guys got something out of this. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button right now. Just take 1 second, bang, hit it. Really helps me. And I will see you guys on Tuesday next week for my next live stream. Get your questions in, put your comments up for anything that you guys want me to talk about, and I'll talk about the thing that I think is most relevant for everyone. Have a great day, everybody. See you soon.